Prophecy News Watch has an article that came out about a week ago, and it's called 9 Signs That the United States and NATO Are Both Preparing for War, talking about with Russia. So I'm not going to mention all 9 of these. I'm going to use 7 of these points, and actually one of these will be my own. But I'm going to use these 7 points as kind of the backdrop for this week's program. And the Prophecy News Watch article starts like this. The only way that Russia could possibly be defeated in Ukraine would be if Western forces get directly involved in the conflict. Sadly, it appears that events are rapidly taking us in that direction. When long-range missiles that are provided by Western countries and that are guided to their targets by Western countries start slamming into Moscow, it is likely that the Russians will respond with overwhelming force. That will give Western countries all the justification they need to officially enter the war, and then we will just be one step away from a nuclear apocalypse. And that's a real threat. Now it seems it's happening. And I'm going to go through 7 signs or 7 points here that the US and Europe and NATO are preparing for war. Here's number 1. Keith Kellogg, he's a commentator on Fox News, a former military officer. He told Fox News that President Trump has given Ukraine authorization to conduct long-range missile strikes deep inside Russian territory. Trump's getting very frustrated with the peace talks there. They're not going anywhere. And so he's going to, escalate, I think, the ability that he gives Ukraine to hit in Russia. Says it's been confirmed that the U.S. is strongly considering sending a range of 1,000 miles, these Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. They have the range to reach Moscow, and this could be a massive game changer. The Fox News host asked Kellogg, are you saying it is the president's position that Ukraine can conduct long-range strikes into Russia that had been authorized by the president? And Kellogg responded, I think reading what he has said and reading what Vice President Vance has said, as well as Secretary Rubio, the answer is yes. So Putin now is responding to this, saying if that happens, then they're going to bring the nuclear option on the table. Now, Russia always threatens that, but I think this could be a real threat. Number 2, according to the Wall Street Journal, the Pentagon is asking firms that produce missiles for the United States military to double or even quadruple production rates. The article says this, the Pentagon, alarmed at the low weapons stockpiles the U.S. would have on hand for a potential future conflict with China, is urging its missile suppliers to double or even quadruple production rates at a breakneck schedule. This could be for China or if there's some kind of outbreak with NATO. Number 3, this is fascinating. Listen to this. Conscription of soldiers for the Russian military has reached the highest level in 9 years. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered the conscription of 135,000 men by the end of 2025, just a couple months away. It's the largest conscription in 9 years. It's going to be men from 18 to 30 years of age. Think about this. Russia has suffered 1 million casualties so far in the war with Ukraine. Now, I live in Oklahoma City, and the greater Oklahoma City area with all of our suburbs is about 1 million people, or a little over 1 million people. That's how many casualties there have been in this war that Russia suffered. Not all those are deaths, but probably at least 250,000 of them, or maybe 300,000 are deaths. I mean, it's staggering. So they're having to conscript now 135,000 more soldiers. Now, added to that, I just read this actually today, the Cubans are going to be sending over the next few months 25,000 soldiers to fight against Ukraine and Russia. This will be the largest fighting force from another country that Russia will have. It'll eclipse the number of fighters they have from North Korea. And I thought about this week in Ezekiel 38:6, after it mentions all the specific nations that'll be in part of this invasion, which will be Russia, Turkey, Iran, Syria, or Sudan, and Libya. It kind of has a catch-all phrase down there and says, and many peoples with you. And it could be these many peoples with you will be North Koreans, Cubans, as Russia's kind of patching together this army because of the casualties that they've had. So Russia could employ the same strategy they're employing today in the future Gog-Magog war. And that could be the reason you have that catch-all phrase, many peoples with you. Here's number 4. Denmark is suddenly calling up hundreds of reservists. In Denmark, reservists are urgently being called up for service. The decision was made due to drones in Danish airspace. Soldiers were instructed to report as quickly as possible. Number 5, NATO forces in the Baltic Sea are in a state of enhanced vigilance. Number 6, European hospitals are being instructed to prepare for mass casualties. French hospitals have been instructed to prepare for mass casualties by March 2026. French hospitals have been told to prepare for a potential armed conflict in Europe by next year. That between 10,000 and 50,000 men could be expected in hospitals over a 10 to 180 day period. Germany is preparing to treat up to 1,000 wounded troops per day. Germany's armed forces are planning how to treat a potential 1,000 wounded soldiers a day should a large-scale conflict between NATO and Russia break out. Number 7, a fleet of US tankers just made the long journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Flight trackers have spotted a fleet of US air tankers crossing the Atlantic. Around a dozen Stratotankers were making the journey with several en route to RAF Mildenhall, a major Air Force base in England. And this is fascinating here. The presence of air tankers can indicate that the US or NATO is addressing an urgent military requirement for fighter jet refueling capacity. The last time we witnessed a deployment of tankers of this magnitude, we bombed Iran's nuclear facilities. So each of these things in this list, I think, are noteworthy by themselves, but in collection and in convergence, these are significant. Now, at the same time as all these developments, Vladimir Putin right now has traveled to a former Soviet state to conduct talks. The Hill has this headline, Putin is visiting Tajikistan for meetings with other ex-Soviet leaders. So Putin right now is having talks with Tajikistan's president, which will be followed by a Russian Central Asia summit, which will involve leaders from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And you add in Tajikistan, that's the 5 of these former nations that formed what I call the underbelly of the old Soviet Union. And there are about 60 million Muslims that live in these nations. And these nations are part of ancient Magog, which is part of this invasion in the end times. It was the land of the ancient Scythians. Some believe that even Ukraine could be part of ancient Magog as well. So Putin is there talking to these leaders of these ex-Soviet states, trying to strengthen relations with them. And of course, he wants to reconstitute the Soviet Empire. But all these developments in conjunction and convergence paint a very alarming picture. Something is up with Russia, and it could be a preparation for them to try to provoke the nations of NATO to respond so that they can go all in. So that there's no doubt that the Russian bear right now is on the move. And we know that the tracks will ultimately lead straight into the land of Israel for a final showdown there on the mountains of Israel, where God will deal Russia and its allies a fatal blow.